My name is Elwood Brown, and I'm a local boy from South Amboy, New Jersey. What I want to do is just tell you a little bit about life as it was at the turn of the century. Now, as you can see by my stone, I wasn't a big shot. I wasn't a ship's captain. I wasn't a big railroad man. I was just a kid who grew up in South Amboy, lived here all my life, born here, married here, and died here. Now, first off, I was born in the year of 1875. So let's go back. I can remember it so well. We had dirt roads. We didn't have automobiles. We didn't even have electric lights. We had a trolley going down Broadway. I learned I was born in a building across the street from a building that's still there, where many years later I opened my grocery store. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. The way I got in the grocery business is kind of interesting. I was 14 years old and there wasn't much to do. There wasn't any games to play, etc. Life was pretty simple back in those days. There was no other diversions other than what you could make for yourself. Well, I found a couple of beat up wagons and I got some parts and I got some lumber and somebody gave me some paint and I worked on them and I fixed them up. I sold them and I had enough money that I bought off a guy an old horse. Well, the horse was strong, but he couldn't run very fast, but he was a good horse. And I got the idea that I was going to go into business with this horse. So I rode the horse bareback. I didn't have anything but a rope. I took the horse bareback all the way to Manalapan, to an uncle who loaned me a harness. He said I could keep it as long as I needed it, and the harness would pull a wagon. Now, I didn't have a wagon. The ones I sold were small, and I didn't have one of my own. So I went to a friend of mine, a neighbor, and he had a wagon, and he said I could borrow it. So I borrowed the neighbor. His name was Mike Leonard. And Mike said, all right, you can keep it, but bring it back. He says, oh yes, I will. So wouldn't you know, I have this wagon now, and I've got a horse to pull it, and I got on a boat, and I went over to New York, over to Staten Island, where they had a farmer's market. I got a sack of potatoes, a big bag of onions, and a great big sack of fresh cabbage. And I came back, put that on the wagon, and around I went everywhere, and I sold it out in one day and made a nice profit. You know what, folks? I was in the grocery business. Well, things weren't all rosy that day. Wouldn't you know, I ran across another kid my age who was 14, and he had a little wagon, and he was selling fish, and the wagon broke. So I loaned him mine. Well, it wasn't really mine, it was Mike Leonard's. Anyway, so Billy took the wagon, and wouldn't you know, I talk about bad luck, he ran into Mike Leonard in town, and Mike wanted to know what he's doing with his wagon. So a big argument ensued, and Mike took his wagon home, and then he got a hold of me after that. Boy, did I get a tongue lashing. But we became very good friends. It's really the beginning of the grocery business. It was that simple. Now I want to talk about my grocery store a little bit. It was called the H.F. Brown grocery store, and I have lots of pictures of it. It sat over here at 138 Broadway. The building is still there, and the grocery business operated for many, many years, from the 20s all the way up and to close to my death in the 40s. I actually lived and died in the same house. My house that I lived in was over on Main Street. It was 331 Main Street, which is over near the Kawanza Funeral Home, if you're familiar with that. And that house is still there. And I have pictures of the house taken back in the 20s and the store in the 40s. Now I got to tell you about my tragedies. I married Beatrice in 1902. Remember, I was born in November. I died in December, but in January of 1902 we got married. We had one girl, and that was followed by 4 boys. 2 of the boys were twins. There they are. My boys are twins. I have pictures of them here. These nice folks from the cemetery tour brought these pictures so us ghosts could share these with you. What had happened was the boys' names were Harry and the other was Oliver, but everybody called him James. And James was with his friend Bill Lucklick, and they were running across Main Street. They were having Decoration Day. There was a big ceremony going on through the weekend, and I believe it was following on a Monday, May 30th. My son, James, and his friend were running across Main Street and ran out in front of a car. The guy driving the car, based on numerous witnesses, said, because there were a lot of people in town, it was very crowded, said he was not speeding. And he swerved to miss the boys. He did miss the first one, but the second one was my son. He got hit and the car went over his head and he was killed. He was taken to a hospital and immediately declared dead. So this is why James is here. He died at age 9. His twin brother, Harry, lived to age 60, which also was my age when I passed away. So this is just a little bit of what I wanted to tell you about life in South Amboy. We had good and bad. We had a lot of festivities, and we all had an opportunity if we were willing to work. My grocery store had a motto, and it said, "We deliver at chain store prices." And the grocery store also carried drugstore items, and get a load of this, we were the biggest supplier around of auto parts. Back in those days, you didn't have the inventories that were that big, and it wasn't hard to do, and we carried the common items so we could keep our cars going. Remember, transportation around here wasn't all that great. We did have a terrific railroad system. And to get up and down in town, we had our trolley. But other than that, you walked or you rode your horse. And that's my story. Thank you for coming to visit. As you can see, I haven't had any visitors for some time, and maybe I'll see you again next year. Thank you. If you wish to come and look at some of these pictures, they're all authentic.